Committee for February 18th, 2016, and I just want to remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. Do we have any comments from the public before we get started? Any comments from the committee?
I actually just had one. While I was doing the minutes last time, I went through the videotape, and for about 15 minutes, Kerry had a list of several longer-term items that seemed to frame concerns about ongoing budgets. I wondered if, not now, but after the after the annual town meeting, we could carve out some time and say the budget opportunities section of the minutes of the, my goodness, minutes of the agenda to discuss that as a way of, say, maybe framing the process going forward with an eye toward future consequences of budgets. Just a suggestion.
Okay, we can put that on the agenda once we get past the budget process for this year.
Thank you.
Great. Any other comments from the committee? Okay. We are starting our departmental budget reviews, and this evening we have police and fire, and we're very pleased to have with us this evening Chief of Police Jim Marino.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here. I passed out some packets, giving you copies of the presentation tonight. The budget we submitted a month ago to the town manager before she made a recommendation, and some of the documents I gave to the capital planning committee as well, including my 5-year and 15-year plan. That's all in that packet there. And of course, at any, my door's open anytime, so if there's any questions on any of that, by all means, please either stop by or give me a call, and I'd be, more than happy to answer them. I've had Terry down last week. We walked around the yard, looked at our vehicle inventory, and again, I invite anybody down to look at that as well if there's any questions about that. And I know some questions came up at one of your meetings pertaining to capital purchases. So, anything I can do to clear up those questions, please. I'd prefer that, that you either call me or stop down, and I'm more than happy to answer them. So, tonight, I know we're talking about the budget, so I always include our table of organization. The town manager asks for it every year at budget time. Not too much has changed. I'm still showing 3 vacancies because I'm still looking to put on at least 3 more patrol officers. But this is how we're organized. I have an administrative support, public safety coordinator. That's Linda Carey, and she works 36 hours a week. And then Mike Luth is the lieutenant. He's here tonight. He's seated in the audience here tonight. And he's the second in command, and I can tell you that the police department wouldn't run efficiently without him. A huge asset to the police department. Then we have investigative services, and I just took on a partnership with animal control. And as you can see, we have a patrol staff that's supported by a canine/traffic officer, the desk officer, and reserve intermittent officer. So these are our mission. This is our mission statement and core values. This is posted on the wall at the police station to remind and so forth everybody that comes in that this is what our mission is. I thought it'd be good to share that with you as well. Let me get right into the budget. So these are some of the goals that I stated in my budget request this year. And one of the big things is I started working towards accreditation. We're now in self-assessment. The only thing I would say, and I didn't include it in my budget this year, with respect, to, I know that the funding, funding isn't totally available. So I was hoping to at least hold that off till you know, maybe there's some future growth of funding or whatever that might come along, but this isn't a very expensive program, but this Power DMS software I'm gonna need to get us through the accreditation process efficiently. Power DMS will help me to push out all of the policies, general orders, memorandums and so forth, as well as a whole host of other things. And as I move through this presentation, there's a list of what Power DMS does. The initial startup cost is around $3,600, but it would cost the town about $2,000 a year to maintain it. And at some point, I'm going to ask to have that included in my budget request. This year, we're asking to replace another 2 patrol cars because our fleet is getting very old. The newest car, the two I'm replacing last year were 5 years old. They're over 150,000 miles on. The newest car I have is 2014, so that's going to be 2 years old. That's got almost 40,000 miles on it already. I'm asking this year in FY17 to replace 2 more. I'm trying to get it back up to speed. We fell behind when Ford decided not to make the Crown Vic any further, and we had to, at that point, I asked for 3 cars, and I ended up getting 2 Crown Vics, and then the manufacturers didn't produce what we needed to fit our operational requirements for at least a couple of years, so we fell behind. So I'm trying to play catch up now, and as you'll see in my capital plan, I'm asking for 2 for the next couple of years, and you'll see it drop down to 1. So, you know, we're starting to play catch up, and it goes up and down. It goes up 2 and 1, but at any rate, we really need to renew the entire fleet. Getting into the budget, what I did here is I took the spreadsheet and I just added a couple of columns, one being the town manager's recommended budget. I added just to show where we differed. The above target is maybe what I asked for as opposed to what the town manager recommended. The estimated salary increases, the police union will be negotiating a new contract starting in July. I just threw that in there, just as, just so you'd be aware that down the road, there may be an increase in salary line items. And I just estimated it, I threw out 2.5% just as an estimate. That's not, that's nothing that we already etched in stone. That's just to give us some kind of idea at what it might cost. And then as part of the above target, I'm going to show what it costs again this year if we were to hire any additional staff. So I'm kind of moving fast. I don't know if you have any questions on this particular piece of the presentation. Again, in red, we're showing what we differ from the town manager's recommendation, and those figures also include additional staffing. So,
Jim, if I might,
Yeah.
what's the timing of the contract?
They're beginning negotiations now, but the contract expires on June 30th of this year.
So at the end of this fiscal year?
Right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is the expense piece of that spreadsheet, and again, what we went above target as opposed to what was recommended. We just tried to figure, even though I think the index this year is actually negative, but we know that nobody seems to pay attention to that because the products that we buy still keep going up, even though the economy is supposed to be in better shape. So we threw in a couple of percentage points on some of the needed equipment, the office supplies, printing, and so on and so forth. FQ supplies, those are our firearm supplies. There's a significant increase, which the town manager agreed with me on that, because now it includes taser supplies, because we do carry tasers now, and we have to qualify with them every year. So those training cartridges we buy are quite expensive. So I had to add to that account to cover the taser training. Training course fees, that additional $10,000, that's if we hired 3 officers, because it's $3,400 a piece, I believe, to put them through the academy if it happened. And then moving on to, the budget, the lockup portion of the budget, police, fire, medical, injury leave. Nothing has really changed there. We ended up even on the lockup budget. and, police, fire, medical, and injury leave, all zeroed out. Down the bottom, I'm showing that we're 4685 apart from the town manager, but going back to the salary lines, if you notice, it's probably a lot more than that, because I'm in the middle of negotiating a contract, and I think we have it settled, it just hasn't been signed yet, and I think the town manager said she would speak to that, so there'll be some increase in our salary in terms of my payroll line item. So that 4,600 could be more like 14,000 or 13,000. But the town, I asked the town manager if I should include it, and she said she'd just speak to that portion of our budget. So that's where we are in terms of the budget itself. I just threw this in there. This is my 5-year plan, just as a point of interest. Again, in 2017, I'm asking for those 2 cruisers to be replaced. I asked for a 4-wheel all-terrain off-road enforcement vehicle. This is the 3rd year I've asked for it, and I understand I got down the bottom of the priority list. It wasn't on it last year at all, so I'm hopeful maybe by next year. And just so the public knows, the reason I'm asking for this is because when I get a call to send a police car down to somebody's private property because there's a motorcycle or some other vehicle ripping up their property, and we can't do anything about it because we have no way to get out there except on foot. And I'm not about to send a guy out there on foot. It's too dangerous, and it puts them away from the police car. And when you only have sometimes 2 guys on a road, I don't want them out in the middle of the road, in the woods, middle of the woods, chasing somebody around on a 4-wheeler on foot. So, in addition to that, there's a lot of conservation land now that has to be patrolled, and we are not able to do that. So, to be more effective, because I don't want people to think we just don't have the resources to do the job, to be more effective, I wanted that in my toolbox, parked in a trailer that we have down there that can be hooked up to the traffic enforcement car, or the community outreach person can run out with that 4-wheeler and answer those calls and be more effective with it. So that's why I'm asking for that. The archive records room, we've asked for that for a couple of years. Again, I understand why it comes down off the priority list. Obviously, you know, I can wait for that, but at some point, because managing records is so restricted now, and in fact, the Senate's coming out with another version of that bill to try to make some changes in how public records are distributed. We have to be very concerned about where those records reside. Presently, they're just basically sitting in a cold storage space up in the station. All I want to do is build a room that's got heat and air conditioning in it, and a computer, so that when we run up there, you know, it makes it easier for us to get a hold of the records, which is a daily occurrence, by the way, and sometimes 4 or 5 times a day. And it's going to be an air conditioning room, so that the documents are all paper, so that they'll be preserved. The only other thing was riot control protection gear. I'm piggybacking off last year. We got those bulletproof shields. Looking for the bulletproof helmets and so on and so forth to complete that purchase. This is, you know, for critical incidents, possible, you know, any kind of active shooter incidents that we train for every year. We need that equipment, again, to be more effective. Again, to offer another level of protection to the town should it be necessary. And again, I can't emphasize enough that the police department's primary goal is to be prepared. It may, just like the military, something may not ever happen, but we have to be prepared for anything.
Chief, before you move on, what was the amount for the archive record room?
It's on...
Is it in the capital plan?
Yeah, I think it was
25,000.
25,000 if I remember.
May I interject, though?
Yeah.
I served on the capital plan, and one of the issues was the fact that the planning process appeared to be somewhat up in the air with respect to the location of the room, the physical space, and indeed the $25,000 estimate. Mm-hmm. And so I think that you know, we're just waiting for more specifics to give it a fairer shake.
Right.
That's where we came down. Thanks.
Right.
Yeah, I'm I understand that as well. I know what all the problems are with that request, and I was made aware of that. Thank you for pointing that out. And again, it's something, we're living with it right now. I'm not gonna take money away from some other department that may need it more, just so we can do that. But, those records are governed by state statute, the use and the distribution of them and so on and so forth. So we have to retain them based on what the law says, and I'm just trying to protect them. So anyways, moving on. Again, real quick, this is a future funding request, the Power DMS software, again, about $3,600. I won't go into all of what it does, but it's there in front of you, and it's going to be really helpful for us to get moved through the accreditation process. And again, like I said, I'm in self-assessment stage right now. I think it's going to take me probably 3 years at least to get it done, and this will really make the job a lot easier. And you can see some of the uses of it in terms of the policy process, training. There's a training module that's going to help us, and just in the accreditation process itself. The good thing is too, it requires an electronic signature, and that's today's world. I can push it out. I don't have to use paper. I'm going to save money on paper, and I can have them sign it electronically. And now I got a record of it. It's going to be a lot easier for me. I don't have to use the supervisors to help me push the policies out. Saves me time, makes the place run way more efficient. So, any questions on that before I move on? Just wanted to touch on the training again this year, just so you know. We didn't ask for any extra money. Again, we're trying to be fiscally responsible, but I can tell you, most of that mandatory training now, and this is what they're requiring this year, a lot of it comes from the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing. He wants us, he's told all law enforcement agencies in the country, this is some of the things I want you to do, fair and impartial policing. I'd like to think that the Lunenburg Police have been practicing that, at least under my administration. But we're gonna, we're required to do it, and that's what we're gonna do. Unfortunately, every time we send somebody to training, there's times when, we have to pay them to go, but then we have to fill their shifts as well. So that's where the money, that's where we spend the money. In addition to that, I have to send them to professional development. This is all, the mandatory training is just maintaining their training. Then there's extra training that they don't get in the academy, or they don't get it in service. Like in this list below, this is just some of the examples of professional development. These leadership courses, to me, are very important to us, and it should be to the town, particularly from a liability standpoint. I want the best trained people there are. I want the citizens protected, their constitutional rights protected, and I want the town protected from any liability. So, all of these things make for really good police officers. The problem is, it's over and above the 40 hours, so we have to pay them to go. There's fees associated with a lot of these. I was just looking at one tonight. It was $900, again, I think I said this last year, $950 to send a guy to a program for a week. So, in addition to the labor, there's fees. It's a real struggle. I'm just bringing this up because I'm going to be asking for more money in the future for training. I'm going to have to. I'm not going to have any choice. I just want to everybody be prepared for me to come in and cry about money again. I just put this in there to show you what it's going to cost. Again, this year, I've done this the last 3 years. This is what it costs to hire 3 people. This year, I added a line on the bottom showing you, I just basically divided it by 3, and that's 69,160.66 is primarily what it costs to hire a patrol officer today. I'm going to go into why right now, but I just wanted to break it down for you. These aren't worst case scenarios, these are averages. So we hire somebody maybe with a master's degree, or somebody with a bachelor's degree, or somebody with an associate's degree. Obviously, if we hired 3 guys with master's degrees, a little more money, because we pay them educational incentives. So, but what we try to do is averages figure out. Same with the evening differentials, night differential day, and so on and so forth. Anyways, why do I want cops? Nothing goes down. You can see over 5 years, the arrest rate has increased 180.1%. Incidents 61.9. There's no, I can't fudge these figures. This is what it is. I threw in accidents just to show you the picture. It did go up a little bit again this year. It goes up, seems to go up every year. Traffic increases. So your accident rate's going to increase. We can't help that. They're out there trying to do enforcement. There's only 2 guys, so although we do have the traffic enforcement guy 4 days a week, that helps, but not enough. And then this is calls for service over the past 5 years. Keeps going up. 25% increase. Self-initiated goes up, and self-initiated calls, those will change as dispatched calls change. So usually the more dispatch calls you have, self-initiated goes down because they don't have time to self-initiate. They don't have time to stop cars, to check buildings, to do all those other extra things because they're being dispatched to calls. So, what's going to happen, and I can see it coming, is self-initiated is going to continue to go down. I did this study just to show you the disparity in the amount of arrests and incidents versus the number of police officers Lunenburg has. I used, I think 6 or 7 of these examples of towns about the same size that are surrounded by cities, actually, in these cases, a little bigger than Fitchburg and Leominster. Probably 1.5 times the size of Fitchburg and Leominster. These are very accurate figures. Hanson, you can see, next to Brockton and East Bridgewater, 214 arrests hours, 636 arrests. 614 incidents to 1,305, and so on and so forth. Freetown, I threw that in there, even though the population is actually a little less, but it's next to Fall River in New Bedford. Look at that, and they're using, they have, I think it's 17 officers. There isn't, the range runs from 17 to 22. Hanson having 19, Norwell next to Weymouth, Quincy, Braintree, 22 guys. Most of them are 18. And then I put, Leicester's right next to Worcester. They're running 18 people, and he said they have one in the academy, I believe. But they're again, 464 to 636. I threw in Air Pepperell, Littleton, and Groton because they're close to Lunenburg. Just as information. And look at that. Look at Pepperell, for instance, 11,000 people, 149 arrests to our 636, and they're running 18 people. So that's why I'm looking for help. I did a workload analysis the last 3 years. I showed that there's not enough people to cover all the hours, and how to, I'll go into how we do that, but I was asked to show you some anecdotal stuff. This is the FBI's, this is the UCI, the Uniform Crime Report. Basically what this says is towns in the Northeast, they average 1.8, towns the size of Lunenburg, 1.8 police officers per 1,000 people. So that'd be 18 cops. That's the average. That's what the FBI reports. This is a report that comes out annually, although this is, I use this one because it's 5 years old, just as a point of interest. 5 years ago, they were looking at 1.8. I don't know what it is now, to be honest with you. Again, this is a very old story, so I went through all the town reports. I found one. I actually found 1996. I want to go back 20 years. They got a grant then. We were up to 12 officers in 1996. This is 20 years later, and we have 14, and that includes Mike and I, and we're administrative. We don't leave the building unless the, what hits the fan. So 20 years ago, we're at 12. And so I pulled up some of the most recent from 2004 on, and you can see there's language in every single one of them. Low staffing levels, I stress the importance of investing in proper patrol and office staffing. I continue to work with town officials on a concerted effort to address our department's staffing needs. The department continues to operate understaffed, and so on, and so on, and so on. Old story. And this has been going on for 20 years. So, at some point, we really need to address it. We're gonna become ineffective. As I said many times, the town's not gonna wanna pay for us anymore. They're just gonna think we're useless. Can't have that. We as a town can't have that. So, Mark, I think you asked one time, well, how do you guys, you get all these hours, you can't cover everything. Well, we use the, the authorized level approach. We have to bring people in, and again, already in 6 months, 81 times we've had to keep people over, call them in, or whatever, to make it work on overtime. So, that's just up until, I believe it was January 1st. July 13th to January 30th. And that's, again, that's that IFS account, which you were kind enough, you actually boosted up for me last year, which was a big help. That's investigation and field services. That's what we use that money for. And I thank you for that. And that really helps us try to get the job done. So that's really all I have to offer today. I don't know if there's any questions, or if I haven't covered something you thought I was going to cover.
Actually, I have a couple of comments and then a question or two as well. I thought that was very clear and concise, very well done. I particularly appreciate the graphs that show the increase in arrests and incidents over a 5-year period.
Yeah.
That's what makes this a compelling case for adding to the staffing level.
Mm-hmm.
One of the questions that I've asked in the past is, does it have to be all 3 positions, or would one additional position help to some extent? Wouldn't fully fund all of your requirements, but would it at least help?
It would help. It would definitely help. It would help me on the second shift, I think, to have an extra guy. Obviously, I'm not going to back down. I could use, if 3 only brings me to 17, we're still behind the 8 ball, but one person would definitely help me immensely. I mean, we are very busy. Mike and I could use another administrative person, being honest with you. I could use definitely a full-time secretary. We just don't have that. Him and I have no time extra to do anything extra. We are out straight usually all day long. Having even one other guy would be a big help.
Yeah.
But and again, that doesn't mean I'm not, even if you funded one guy this year, I'm gonna be back next year. I gotta be honest with you. I'm gonna be crying for help probably till I retire.
I want to encourage you to keep coming back with that message. It's important that we continue to hear that message. Don't give up.
Yeah.
We may not have the ability to fund that as quickly as we'd like to, but I think we need to keep it front and center.
Yeah.
So that when we're talking about priorities and service levels, that's something that we're considering.
All right. Well, and I obviously appreciate that. And just to be clear about my answer, what you're asking me is absolutely true. Anything would help me at this point. Try to, make things more efficient. So yes, the answer is yes. And again, like I said, I'm going to try to keep this issue on the radar, as much as possible. And I really appreciate your help. Really do.
Questions from the committee?
I have, just to piggyback on what Mark said, first of all, just an extremely clear, superb presentation regarding framing the needs. And it's particularly the graph that compares towns of similar sizes located closely to fairly medium-sized cities in the Commonwealth. Any idea, and I know that individual cities and towns differ enough to make direct comparisons problematic, or at least sometimes misleading. Any idea why our arrest rate, which 5 years ago would have fit in fairly well in this particular chart, and maybe a little bit on the high side, but not egregiously high, Any idea why our arrest rate is a third or 40% higher per capita than, say, Maynard or Holbrook?
Well, I mean, a lot of it has to do, I don't want to point fingers at anybody in public, but we have a voluminous amount of traffic that comes through Lunenburg from southern New Hampshire and so on and so forth. A lot of these arrests are related to the opiate problem. There's a lot of motor vehicle arrests because I forget what it was, 25,000 cars a day, I think, goes up and down Route 2A. That's part of that picture. I'm not going to give you a clear answer on this. I just know that it's just the placement of the town and geographically puts us in a position where we're getting traffic from New Hampshire, traffic from Worcester, traffic from Fitchburg and Leominster, traffic from the east coming into Lunenburg. And a lot of it is related to the opiate problem. And the drug problem in general. A lot of the arrests are related to that in some form. And again, a lot of it's moving. Cars come through town and people are violating the law. There's a significant amount of larcenies, frauds, there's domestic abuse, there's shoplifting. And by the way, I always hear this, that Walmart has a big impact on our numbers, and it isn't a huge impact. I mean, yeah, we have a significant amount of shopliftings, but not in comparison to some of the other crimes that occur in town. So, and it's not, the fortunate thing, a lot of it isn't violent crime. I don't want to give people the idea that they live in a city that's not safe. Our violent crime rate is fairly low. So a lot of the arrests aren't related to violent crime. There is some, but not a lot of it. So I can't give you, I'd like to give you the perfect answer to that, and I really can't. That's always something, that's a question we ask each other. Why, we'll come in on a Monday morning and there's 8 people in a cell block. We're like, are you kidding me, in Lunenburg? We even shake our heads, and I can't tell you why that is. I think, I got to tell you though, I know for a fact, being in this business for so long and managing it, that, and I don't want to sound like a salesman, the more guys you get out there on patrol, the more that acts as a deterrent. As a matter of fact, the reason probably their numbers are down on some of those other towns, when you get 22 guys out there, you get 4 or 5 guys a shift in a small town, that's a deterrent to crime. Right away, there's visibility. Something we emphasize, it's just we only have 2 cars sometimes, and it's hard to be visible if you're going from call to call to call. And we're working on, placing cars in strategic locations too. You'll notice in the morning, there's cars down here all the time. Why? Because the biggest population is down to school during the morning. People are going back and forth to work. This is the busiest place. So you're going to see a car most often every morning down here. I want them there because it's a strategic place for us to be visible, to create a deterrent to crime. Running through the neighborhoods, our burglary rate's going to go down if we have cars constantly, rotate or patrolling through neighborhoods. That's going to drop the burglary rate, which is not as low as I'd like it to be right now. So, again, police presence creates a deterrent to crime and creates crime prevention. And I can't emphasize that enough. And we've run at such a small department for so many years that we just can't offer that service efficiently. We can't be everywhere at once. And it's a big complaint with all the residents. Why aren't you on my street? Well, I'd love to be on some little tiny street that has no traffic, but we have to be on Mass Ave or Summer Street, Route 13, where the population is.
It was a fairly open-ended question. The question was rather unfair, so broad that it did not invite a specific answer, but your answer was very thorough, and I appreciate it. It helps me understand the problems and the possible solutions to just more men on the street or more patrol officers on the street. But I do have a follow-up. in the run-up to this meeting, I did go over your presentation last time. And one thing stuck out there, which was that is a corollary to the drug problem and the opioid problem. You mentioned that some of the arrests even were a little more dicey. Is that still the case?
Dicey and,
Dicey, a little more fraught with, say, behavioral problems. The officers have to
yeah,
confront.
yeah, I mean, it hasn't changed much. I wouldn't say we've had more problems, but I think it's pretty much the same as it was last year. I wish I didn't even think of this. I could have broken down every single crime, shown you what crimes were committed and how many of each crime was committed. I mean, I could spend an hour and a half going through that, but I'm sorry I didn't think of that, because I could give you a better picture, or a better answer. I just didn't do that, but I can do that.
I just wanted to make sure my recollection was correct, and to frame it more, as much for the public as is for me. Thanks.
And, let me just say this, and this is I have a really good crew right now. We have some very well-educated, highly motivated people. They're out there doing their job. I mean, they do what they have to do, and that makes a difference too. And that's, there again, that's good for the town. It's good because they're looking out for everybody by doing their job. So, that might have something to do with our picture, but with, actually, I say 14 guys. I keep saying 14 people. Mike and I, we don't go out unless we have to. We have other responsibilities. There's really only 12 people doing that job. That's not a lot. 12 people, including the chief 20 years ago. So anyways, I'm beating a dead horse here. I'm sorry. That's probably not the best way to put it, but.
Any other questions?
I do, actually. So I guess I just looking for some, as I'm looking through the numbers and I'm hearing you speak, two questions, I guess. One, last year we had the whole Narcan discussion when we were here.
Right.
And it was something that the town asked you to provide but didn't provide a funding source.
Yeah.
Did we throw any of that at you this year?
No.
Anything above,
I
like
didn't even
overly
ask
above?
for it. We've been trained on the use of Narcan, at least the present help, and we're trying to train everybody that comes in on the use of Narcan. We do have the product. We keep Narcan on hand for those, problems. I didn't ask for it because of that. I think, we've made the adjustments in our budget to be able to afford it.
Okay.
We've gotten, although I didn't even think of this, and I'm glad you brought that up, but I didn't think of it, honestly, when I did the budget. But, now I'm starting to see, you just reminded me of something. I'm starting to see stories about how now that Narcan's so common that the price is starting to creep up. So I may be back looking for money for that, unless there's some other funding source or somebody's offering some kind of discount prices on it or whatever. Then I may be back to look for that. But right now, we made those adjustments and we're doing all right with that. And we have saved some people, so, but I appreciate you.
So my next question is, like you had mentioned a little bit ago, some people are under the impression that Walmart adds a tremendous amount of calls onto your already overloaded call logs. And I'm looking at some of these towns, and obviously you're not going to know this off the top of your head, but we'll use Lunenburg and Hanson because they're next to each other. So Hanson doesn't have a Walmart. I don't know if they have any other towns. I guess I'm just wondering if some of these nuisance-y type calls that come from places like that, if it's something that, it's worthy to look into to, I don't know how it works. Is there a nuisance fine? I don't know. To say to these companies, you're here, you need to offer.
What they do is I think they still do this. I know there was some controversy about it, but they actually, if we charge somebody with shoplifting, they assess them a civil fine of $250. They still do that?
In other places, not here.
Not here?
You mean, you're talking about in court?
No, Walmart itself, the store, and Hannaford's.
I don't think they're still doing that.
No,
The stores.
there was some controversy about that because it was kind of being convicted twice. It was, double jeopardy thing. But that's what they used to do, and maybe that's the case. Maybe they stopped them. I know it was controversial, and the courts were trying to stop it. But they used to charge the person $250 plus we'd charge them, and they'd get you know, they go to court, pay fines there.
I just didn't know if that was maybe some of the differences in, you know, I don't know what our percentages of Walmart, Hannaford, shoplifting type things, but, you know, some of these other towns that we're comparing to, which we are rightfully being compared to, like you said, they're
Yeah.
surrounded by bigger towns,
Yeah.
bigger cities. You know, is their makeup of things that cause calls the same as ours, such as Walmart and Hannaford and,
I looked at, when I did that study, I kind of looked around, I did find that some of them didn't have major anchor stores. Amazon's just building, I think it's actually, is it Hanson, or one of the ones right next to Fall River, they're building a huge warehouse. It's gonna employ like 500 people. I was saying, too bad we couldn't get that one in Lunenburg, employ 500 people, you know? But, no, I noticed that, there wasn't a ton. In fact, I asked those questions when I made those phone calls to other chiefs, and, you know, trying to obtain some of these numbers. Some of them had the anchor stores, some of them didn't. That's one of the things I was trying, but, you know, again, Walmart doesn't account for a ton of our crime. I mean, yeah, you know, we have some, you have unarmed robberies up there, you know, somebody grabbing somebody's purse and shoplifting, you know, in the parking lot, or shoplifting, but it doesn't happen all the time. And again, and I can't emphasize enough, those are crimes out in the parking lot. If we had more people patrolling the area, it would serve as a deterrent to that sort of thing. You know, I mean, we only have one shopping center. It's not like some of the other cities where they got to patrol 4 or 5 or 6 huge shopping centers. You know, we can handle one if we had the extra help. You know, it might serve as a deterrent. So it isn't a huge, it's not the biggest part of our crime picture, Walmart. It's just everything. If you saw the list, it's a plethora of different offenses, not just, you know, one. But some of those offenses are related to substance abuse, alcohol, or whatever, you know, something that we're all trying to, you know, contribute to the reduction of. You know, we have a guy he's in a federal drug task force right now. One of our guys is attached to it. You know, that's our contribution to the enforcing the opiate, you know, or attempting to make a difference with the opiate problem. And they're doing great work, but anyway.
thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Jay?
Does, how does hiring more officers, is that kind of offset the overtime, reduce the overtime?
No, because
Why is that?
because it would defeat the purpose of hiring them. So, say, for instance, we have 2 guys on tonight. So we hire a guy. Now we have 3 guys on. Somebody calls in sick, takes a personal day, gets injured. Now this complement drops back down to 2. Instead of filling his position and keeping it at 3, we've defeated the purpose in hiring 1 guy. You see what I'm saying? You defeat the purpose. In other words, if you're gonna hire somebody, then maintain that manning. If you don't maintain the manning, it really defeats the purpose of having them. It's not an overtime eater. That's what I keep saying. You don't hire people to eat overtime when you don't have the help. If I had, you know, if I had plenty of help, yeah, you know, maybe we could use extra manpower to eat overtime. But when you only have 12 guys enforcing laws or out on the road, you really don't have that luxury, you know what I mean? I mean,
So
Yeah.
how do the reserve officers play into this then?
they only work when we can't fill shifts. In other words, if I have a person calling sick, and I can't fill it with a full-time officer, because for whatever reason, they're either maxed out on overtime, because I don't let them work more than 16 hours a day, it's dangerous, or we just can't fill it because they're on vacation, you know, they're with their families, they got other responsibilities or other.
Yeah.
We hire reserve to fill it. And when we do that, obviously we pay less money, but, you know, we save a little money there, but they got first refusal on the contract too, the full-time officers. So we have to call full-time first, then we have to go to reserve list if we can't fill it. So,
So was there ever a break-even point for that, or is the overtime always gonna be this number?
overtime is like a moving target. The overtime line item is only to cover vacation, sick time, and personal days. So what we do is we take an average. We know, we have to say they're gonna take all their vacation time. We have to say they're gonna take their personal days. The sick leave, we do an average. Something Mike and I have been keeping an eye on to keep that down. But, so we have to put enough money in the budget to cover all that. That doesn't mean if we get sick leave declines, we may not use all that overtime money for coverage. If for some reason, so yeah, for those reasons, sick leave overtime, personal, vacation, if we use reserves, we do save a little money as well. And we try to factor that into that figure. We can look at previous years and figure out how many, kind of average out how many times we use reserves. That's how we come up with that number. We just do, we factor them into that equation. Because if we didn't, that number would be much higher. And it's not realistic because we can use force multipliers who work at a different rate, a little bit less than the top patrolman. But I will caution you that our reserves, their pay rate is based on top patrolman's salary. Although this, I'm going to confuse this issue. Well, obviously, full-time guys get time and a half because they work 40 in a 28-day period. They're required to. When a reserve comes in, he gets top patrolman rate. Sometimes he's working with a patrolman that's only been on for a year, and he's at the first step, and he's actually making less money than the reserve officer is. But that's confusing the issue. I mean, I don't want to get into that because it's meaningless. But no, the thing is, we take an average of that. We use the reserve we factor that in, reserve officers factored into that equation. We come up with that overtime figure. Whether or not we'll use that all, I have no idea. I can't predict that. At the end of the year, we'll know, by June, we'll know where we lie with that line item, in terms of, and I'm hoping that we won't use it all because we're really managing the sick time and so forth. So, the vacations and personal time, we can't help. They're entitled to take those. So.
Is there any discussion about like regional lockup to try and offset that cost?
That's a good question. That keeps popping. It's an ugly head that's reared when they talk about regional lockup. And I'll tell you why. It's never going to save us money. I don't care. They can sell that all they want. The sheriff can sell that. It's not going to save us money. You know why?
No.
Because number one, I'm not sending one guy to Worcester with a prisoner by himself. That's a recipe for disaster. You won't see a sheriff transporting prisoners without a van. I'm not putting them in a sedan with one officer and drive 20 odd miles to Worcester with a suspect in the back seat. There's no way. I can remember one time Fitchburg did that, and the guy started the police car on fire in the back seat, and it burned right to the ground on I-190. The officer was lucky to get him out of it by himself, and the guy was fighting with him. I can't do that. That's not, I couldn't in good conscience do that. So anyways, even if we did one guy, so you got an arrest right now, I got to run the guy to Worcester. Okay, so I got one guy out of town. I only got one other guy in town. I can't do that. We have, this contract says you got to have a minimum of 2 guys because now that one guy's working alone, that would be dangerous for him. I can't have him working alone. So I got to put somebody on anyway. Now, they might come up with this whole story out, well, we're going to send a van up to get your arrestees. Oh, okay. When? I still got to hire a guy to watch them while they're in a cell waiting for you to get here. And when you leave, 10 minutes later, I get another arrest. You're going to come back? When? Another 4 hours? Then I got to hire a guy to do that. You know what I mean? It's never going to save money. I think it's ridiculous. So, we'll see. We'll see what happens, because they're building one right now. And I'm telling you, I'm going to fight that fight, because it's not going to save us money. Huh?
They're building a regional facility
Yeah,
now?
down in Worcester.
In
at the
Worcester.
jail. Yeah. And they're going to tout it as a money saver. And then we're going to get, we're going to hear, when I call down there, you have space? No, we're full. I got to hire somebody. It's going to be a horror show. So I'm going to argue that point, honestly. So next time I come in, when the regional lockup is brought up, I'll be here with my gloves on.
We'll be prepared.
Yeah, be prepared. It really doesn't make sense.
And
It doesn't.
that software program you're looking at, is there any grant money available to support that or for purchase of that?
Yeah, and again, and I didn't mention that. I kind of held off too, for two reasons. The second reason I didn't tell you. Massachusetts Police Association is trying to put together a program that might reduce the cost of this if we all sign on for it.
Yeah.
So I'm waiting for that to come forth, and I was hoping maybe that would happen this year as well. That was another reason why I kind of dragged my feet on asking for that this year. If they can get a reduced price, because we all purchase the software. And let me tell you something, it's not just a sales pitch, this is the only program that's certified by the Criminal Justice Information System, which is, that has to be. And it's the only program out there. And everybody in the country uses it. It's not just Massachusetts. Our new tech guy who used to be an Albany police officer, he used it in Albany. He was the guy. And which is good for me, because I'm going to use him if we get it, you know, to help me,
Sure.
you know, implement the programs and so on and so on. He'll teach me how to use it. So we're good there.
Okay.
Anyway.
Terry?
I'm going through your goals for next year, and I see, aside from the patrols to increase safety, it's also a lot around communication and things, and initiating a citizen police academy.
Yes.
Can you speak to that for?
You want to speak to that?
Sure.
Because Mike's going to spearhead that program for me.
Okay.
You're asking specifically what the Citizens Police Academy is?
Yes.
Okay, it's basically an academy that the officers run at the police station where citizens are invited to come and go through a quasi-police academy, and each week would be a different academic subject. They'd learn about criminal law, criminal procedure, arrest procedures, firearms training, defensive tactics, amongst others. And the officers within the department will actually be the instructors, and hopefully near the culmination of the project, or the program, the citizens will actually go do ride-alongs with the police officers, so they'll kind of get all the training, or, you know, a small amount of the training all the way through, and then finish up and go through and see what the officers actually do out on the road, and hopefully get to see some of the stuff they learned.
Now, is the point of that just establishing relationships with the community?
Relationships, but it's also great for an understanding. You'd be amazed at the misunderstanding of what most of the general public thinks the police do. Most people in the town of Lunenburg, most of their police interaction is watching TV, seeing what police do on TV. They don't really see what we do, and their point of view sometimes isn't accurate. Yeah, I'd be amazed. I've done it in a previous town I worked in, and almost everybody was blown away with how busy we are, or what we're doing, and the type of things that even the small town of Lunenburg has to deal with. And it's always been very successful. We've had my experience doing it in the past.
Okay, thanks.
Believe it or not, it's a lot of fun for the officers, because they're getting questions that, like, well, I can't believe these people are asking these questions. Sometimes there's a disconnect on both sides. So it's actually very beneficial for the police officers themselves as well as the citizens.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any questions from the public? Chief Marino, thank you very much.
My
Nice
pleasure.
job.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
too. as
Thanks.
well.
Our next department update is with the fire department, and we're pleased to have Fire Chief Pat Sullivan with us this evening.
Brief intermission when we
Okay?
reset here.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
A short one?
You have one more, chief?
What's it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's
It's a late day. Not counting well.
You remember him speaking to the mic? Sorry? You remember him speaking to the mic for the people at home? Microphone?
Right.
I think the mic is
I don't have it for you right now.
John would have said something.
Sorry, I was supposed to have one. Okay. Didn't get that memo. Good evening. I guess this will be the second chorus of Jim's presentation, since many of my needs are similar. Again, a little bit about the department. Most of you have heard my presentation before. Again, it still says fire department on the side of the trucks, but we're really an all hazards response agency, whether it's a fire, medical emergency, hazardous materials, some sort of a technical rescue to, I've got a strange smell in my house. And that, basically, if it doesn't involve a crime, they're calling us. When all else fails, call the fire department. So what we operate with is basically 5 career people and 40 to 45 on-call firefighters and EMTs. And we operate 3 engines, 1 ladder, 2 brush trucks, 2 ambulances, and some support vehicles. Staffing for the station, we're manned now 7 days a week, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., starting as of July 1 of last year. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically, the career staff covers Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Then on the weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we have 2 of our on-call firefighter EMTs in the station covering Saturday and Sunday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. on basically being paid their call, hourly call rate on a per diem basis. That's been working out very well for us since July. I'll touch on that a little bit further in the presentation. Just a little breakdown on what we do, how busy we are. We responded to just under 2,000 calls for service in 2015. It's approximately a 1.5% increase overall and about a 5.5% increase in EMS-related calls. Again, we continue to see that go up on a regular basis. Over 10 years, you can generally see how our calls have continued to trend up. Over a 15-year period, we've seen almost a 48% increase in our calls. And with the exception of adding the per diem staffing on the weekend, we haven't seen any change in our staffing in that time frame. Again, this goes back for 10 years there. But again, you can see, again, like anywhere else, our fire level activity, that seems to stay about the same. The inspections go up and down depending on what the construction is like in town. The EMS calls continue to go up, and I really don't see any end in that. We continue to get busier and busier on that. As some of the call volume that Chief Marino talked about, we see a lot of those same people. A lot of the people they encounter often need medical attention due to medical conditions or drug interactions, and then we see them and have to take them to the hospital as well and treat them. So we have a lot of crossover in our incidents. They see the increase, so do we. Some of the other things we do, fire prevention, safety, and investigation. We have to investigate all fires by law. Code inspection and enforcement. Again, we're out, we have to inspect any houses on sale or transfer for smoke detectors, oil burner installations, underground propane. We have to, any business that has a liquor license every year, we have to go in and inspect that along with the building inspector, go through with that. And public education and training. That's a big part of what we've been doing. We've been doing that even more and more. I'll talk about some of the grants that we've gotten later on that would have allowed us to get not only in the schools, but out through the senior center and work with our senior citizens to provide fire safety training and some help for them to protect them, because again, they're our most vulnerable populations. And again, part of our job too is emergency management. That sort of falls in with the fire department, as I'm the emergency management director. It's a small part of our budget, but it can still be a fairly large function of the operation. And again, we spend a lot of time on training, which I'll talk about in a minute too. Again, our training, we train twice a month, usually for 1 to 2 hours. Our new personnel all have to go through, if their training is firefighters, have to go to the Fire Academy in Stowe. It's approximately 240 hours, or about 4 months' time, on their own time. They're not paid for that. EMTs, it's another approximately 140 hours that they go to get their EMT, and again, that's on their own time too. The operator training is for operating the fire apparatus. That's, again, another 70 some odd hours that they do in their own time. EMS continuing education, EMTs have to, every 2 years, get so many continuing ed hours, or education hours, to recert their EMT. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about, where I've asked for an above target amount for more money, because there are more requirements that have come down from the state for what our EMTs have to train on. And traditionally, a lot of the EMS training that we've offered in the station has been, again, on their own time. And, again, we also have to train on hazardous materials, technical rescue. We have several members that are part of a regional technical rescue team for people, rescues from heights, from trench collapses, confined spaces, silos, manholes, things like that. Something that each individual town really can't support the equipment of the people, but we've combined with towns throughout Worcester County and are operating on a regional basis with that. But again, most of that training is on the guy's own time as well. Just some of the grants that we've gotten. Last year, we received $2,750 through an emergency preparedness grant, which again helped us replace some of our pagers and our portable radios. And this year, we received the same amount. We're working on updating a trailer to support all the shelter supplies. With the loss of the portable classrooms at the Turkey Hill Middle School, that's where we stored all that. We have a surplus trailer at the station that we're going to retrofit and be able to store all the supplies in that. So we can move it if we have to, or set up somewhere else, or assist another community with it. The SAFE and Senior Safe grants, we received $7,200 on this. This is an ongoing project. This is funding from the state, again, to help us with education in the schools, and also to assist in education with the senior citizens. And that it's helped projects in grades K through 3. It provides not only for materials, but it also covers cost of us hiring some of our people in to go and actually teach the classes. We try to do some of that on duty, but again, we have to be available to respond for calls. So it's much easier to be able to hire in somebody to be able to be dedicated to that project. And if we have the safety trailer that some of you may have seen, it's a regional trailer. It's basically a camper that's set up that we can show hazards in the home. It has a small kitchen, a bedroom. You can put fake smoke in it. And we use it to train children on how to look for hazards in the home, dangerous things, and what to do if they see smoke in their house, and how to get low, crawl into the smoke, and get out. But again, that needs 3 to 4 people to operate it properly. And it's something that we don't normally have the funding in the budget, but this allows us to be able to do that. Same thing with conducting education and safety projects at the senior center. We've conducted 4 classes down there on topics from ice safety, home fire safety, CPR demonstrations. We've tried to make that available to them. And the biggest part would be the purchase of smoke and CO detectors for seniors. As with last year, we've been involved with the Sand for Seniors program through the seniors that was developed by the senior center. Senior citizens for whatever reason, cannot get out and get their own sand. We, through the senior center, provide them with buckets of sand, and what we do is one of our people, usually Captain Reese, delivers that bucket, but when he does, he also, with the permission of the homeowners, he conducts a quick inspection of the home, and if they don't have smoke detectors, we have ones that we can go in and install and set up for them. We've gone, I believe the number was 93 home visits to date, and we've put up 70 some odd detectors in those homes. It's still, the statistics are pretty common across the state. Every year, 50% of the fire deaths in the state, there's no working smoke detectors in the home. The last fire death we had in Lunenburg, there were no working smoke detectors in the home. So this is something that's really, really important. And fortunately, with the grant money, it's something that we can keep going, hopefully. To move along our proposed budget, the above target increases we had in there, again, there was normal salary increases, which the town administrator already had in her recommended budget. My above target requests, again, and this is not really changed from last year, was funding for the 24/7 per diem staffing, some requests for increase in training money, and again, increase in EMS supplies. And I'll touch on each one of those a little bit. Oops, if I can get the computer to cooperate. Yeah, salary line items, under the EMT salary, the 2017 proposed was the $192,630 was to basically be able to cover the night shifts that we do not cover right now. The night shifts are currently covered with on-call people, which means when the radio tone goes off, our people respond in from home, pick up the appropriate apparatus, and respond to the call. To make sure somebody's available for the ambulance all the time, we pay a stipend of $50 to 2 EMTs to be dedicated on call, or what we call hard call, for those shifts, so we know that somebody's always around and to be available for the ambulance. And they cover the nighttime right now. The other numbers in there, the career overtime staff, the 2017 proposed is in the budget right now. That was just a move of money with the increase that I'd gotten in the town administrator's budget. The numbers on the overtime consistently each year were around 30 to 35,000 in overtime. For us, that is almost all callback from my 4 career personnel. They come back after hours on calls on a regular basis. I need them to come back. Most of this isn't shift coverage. Occasionally they will cover each other's shifts, but for most of the time, that's covered with per diem. And contractually, again, they have right of first refusal, but with their work schedule, usually it goes to some of my per diem staff, and they cover that. The same with the weekend on-call officer, moving that to 13,000 actually funds that line item properly. That was something that was left out several years ago when there was an increase. This again was just an administrative change within the budget, and that usually every year we always had to transfer funds to cover that. Each one of the fire officers takes a turn being on call on the weekends when we weren't normally manned. And they're available as a point of contact and to guarantee that we have one of the officers responding on calls. And again, on the weekend with the per diem shifts, we don't always have an officer in the station. It may be two firefighters. So we always have somebody still on call for that. Again, some of the talk, why the permanent staffing. Again, Chief Marino made his presentation, needing personnel. I think most of you have heard my presentation again. We're averaging, when you see the run numbers, when you take out the inspections, we're in the neighborhood of 1,500 calls. One of the towns he used as a comparison was Maynard. I worked in Maynard for almost 24 years. We were handling about 1,400 calls a year without the inspections, and we had 5 guys around the shift, or 5 guys a shift around the clock, which certainly not what I'm recommending here, but it shows the difference and that what we've been doing, what we're doing, and that we need some more sign of help. Again, right now, and I'll show you with the numbers, right now we're getting it done. It's working. Again, when we're on call, the response times can be longer, and I'll show you that because the guys have to go back into the station. But again, my concern is with the increase in the call volume, it's getting harder and harder to sustain. That's always a word that we hear is a sustainability for that. It's getting more and more of a strain on the call force at night, especially to go out and handle a lot of calls. We average, if you look at our numbers, that means we average about 4 calls a day, which doesn't sound like a lot, except when you figure your average ambulance call is anywhere from an hour and a half to 2 hours. By the time you take care of the call, get back, finish the paperwork, which takes almost as long as the call does, and get everything put back together. Fire call may be short, or it could be several hours. That varies a little bit. And what happens in reality, you may go a couple days and you don't have any calls, and then we'll have a day like the other day we had 12, and we ran nonstop. And the challenge with again with our call people, and they do an amazing job. I give them all the credit in the world, but it gets harder and harder when you're out 2 and 3 times in the middle of the night for ambulance calls, and then go off to your regular job. The old days when we only did a couple hundred ambulance calls a year, that wasn't such a big deal if you had one night in the month like that, but when it's regularly through the week, that can start to wear. And again, we push up against time commitments with family, jobs, everything else, and it gets harder and harder for, and people have to make hard choices in that because we are busy. But my biggest emphasis on having the station coverage is response time. Our measurement is always how fast can we get out and get there. The faster we can get to the scene, whether it's a fire or a medical, the better chance we have of helping whatever's going on there. The time definitions, just to go over when I'll talk about a few of the things, and again, I'm sorry, I know some of you have heard this before, but we heard it for several years now, unfortunately. But the dispatch time is the time required to process the call at the dispatch center until they hit the button and the tone goes off. We don't have a lot of control over that. That's down at Neshoba. They do a really good job. With the system, a lot of times now that we have, we'll get the notification on our phones and then we hear the tone go off right afterward. So they're doing a pretty good job with that. The turnout time is the time from when the tone goes off till the truck rolls out the door. And then the response time is when we actually get on scene. National standards say the turnout time should be a minute or less, and the response time should normally be under 4 minutes to get on scene, at least for the first unit. The balance of the other units that are responding, or an ALS unit, they say under 8 minutes. Sadly, that's pretty tough for us to do in town. The map shows that's the range from the station, from the time we leave the ramp to where we can get in 4 minutes. There's no real great answer to that, to meet that standard, other than building a whole bunch more fire stations, which I don't think anybody wants to do and isn't even reasonable to think about anyway. But it's just something, again, all the more reason that we want to be able to get that unit moving that much faster. Again, the dispatch target time is 1 minute or less. I think dispatch probably does that pretty good. The advantage of them down there now is having 2, soon to be 3 on most of the time. One person could be taking the information while the second person gets the call out. So that does help speed things up substantially. Again, the turnout time, targets is supposed to be a minute or less. Right now, when we're staffed, we're averaging about a minute 59 seconds, and we're not staffed, about 3 minutes and 51 seconds. Those are the numbers that I've pulled right off the incidents. The only thing I can say with that is a couple challenges with that is when we're responding, oftentimes we're already on the road, down the road, when the truck is signed on, or the dispatch puts out the second set of tones and it walks over the ambulance as they're signing on. So I would honestly, my feeling is that number is actually significantly less than that's what it is, or when they finally type the time into that. The not staff time has actually come down from last year, and I think the majority function of that is that I have my 3 college students that spend a lot of time at the station. There's a lot more, and there's a couple call people that when they're on call for the ambulance, they stay at the station. There's nothing that requires them to, but they do. So that's actually offset some of the times that it's taken 8-10 minutes to get a unit on the road, that they're there and they can get out fairly faster. Again, just to give you an idea, and this will show a little bit of kind of what's happened now that we've put the, the per diem staffing on the weekends. These are the staffed and unstaffed times in 2014 from 2 months. The red dots are basically when the station wasn't manned, and the scale on the side is in minutes on how long they took to get out. The blue dots are when the station was manned. So generally, at that point, usually 2 minutes or under, we're out the door. If it was substantially longer if we weren't manned. And I can give you the exact numbers. At that point, 55% of the calls were under 2 minutes when we were staffed, but only 20% were under 2 minutes when we were not. This was this year, after we implemented the per diem staffing. What we found is there's actually a significant increase in the calls. We went from 215 to, I believe, 240. It jumped up a little bit more, and much more of the time is actually staffed now. Some of again, I think some of the unstaffed times have been helped by the fact that I have some of the younger guys that have been hanging around the station, which is a great thing for right now. Unfortunately, eventually they're going to get jobs. They're going to probably move on or not be available as much, and we may be back to where we were. So I don't want to knock what they do. It's an awesome job that they do, and it's great to have them around, but it's not something that's going to be there forever. That's the challenge. Again, last year somebody had asked me what runs of time of day. This is the runs without the inspections figured in there. And again, we are busiest mostly from 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. But as you can see, we stay steady right up until the overnight hours. And even the overnight hours, and that there's only a couple that showed basically no activity for a period of time there. And that we get calls any time of the day or night. And again, even when it shows slower, we can't predict when it's going to happen. So we still have to be prepared, just as prepared at 3 a.m. as 3 p.m. This was the hard call coverage, just to kind of show you where that was, or how we were doing, what we were getting before, and that this was a percentage by the different shifts, and that it shows that the weekends were toughest for us to cover. The per diem coverage in the weekend has offset some of that somewhat. You can certainly see it in the handout probably better than you can see it up there. And this was the coverage by month. Traditionally, we used to have more challenges in the summertime. We've been fortunate since July, since we went to the per diem coverage. A side effect of that is we've been covering, we've had no unfilled hard call shifts. Part of that being the requirement that if they're going to work the per diem shifts, they also have to work some of the on-call shifts as well too. So as of right now, we've done a really good job covering those. Again, I'm just not sure how long we're going to be able to sustain that. And again, resuscitation, this is response time considerations. Why? Why is it so important for us to get there? Basically, every minute that somebody's in cardiac arrest, their chance of success is reduced 7 to 10 minutes. Many of you saw that graphically represented a couple years ago here. And that we were fortunate that we were around the corner at the station for a drill, and we were manned for all intents and purposes. But this is one of the reasons why it's so critical for us to be able to get there as quickly as possible. Same with fire growth. I won't try to torture anybody with the video that I tried to use. It would never work the last few years. But one of the things we found, and this one may even be a little out of date, this chart, is with the modern fuels in buildings, fire growth is much more rapid than it used to be. It used to be it could take a half an hour in your grandmother's living room before that fire would reach the point that the whole room was involved and it was spreading through the house. Now that's 5 minutes, and that it happens that fast. And that we've actually had to start training our firefighters differently on how we attack fires because the fuel load is all different in the homes. It's not natural materials, it's all plastics nowadays. It's solidified gasoline, and we have to sort of treat it that way. But again, faster we can get there, get water on it, the better chance we have of, preserving property, preserving any lives that are involved in that. Training. I had asked for, in the above target request, for an additional $12,000 in my training line item. We've had several new mandates that have come out from the state that require our EMTs every 2 years to go through several classes. These are just a list of some of them that have come along for stretcher safety, bloodborne restraints, use of the glucometer for diabetics, use of Narcan. There's several other ones. The point being is that, once again, they've mandated a whole bunch of programs. We train quarterly, and that you can't, our EMTs can go somewhere else to get these classes, but we've been trying to offer them in-house. The problem is once again, it's another thing that's on their own time, and that they really need to be there. I really would like to be able to pay them to be there for these classes. And that eventually it comes down to a point, a part of this is retention of my call people. At some point, they're gonna look and start going, okay, it's not worth it for me to do this anymore. And that, I hope that doesn't happen, but I wanna do what I can to encourage them to stick around and to offset their expenses at doing what they do. These funds that I've requested would basically cover those quarterly trainings, that it would be, quarterly for a couple hours, that would cover these things, and 1 8-hour drill per year. This could be, training for ice rescue, auto extrication, some of the medical stuff, but it would allow us to actually bring more people in and be able to pay them for that. Again, a lot of times, for years we've done it on our own. The guys have done it on their own. They've been great about it. The challenges with everybody's busy lives nowadays, people working harder to make ends meet, they have to start making difficult choices sometimes, and sometimes we're the ones that come up on the end of that because they've got to feed their families, they've got to make commitments to their other jobs, and it's hard to say, well, I'm going to pass up working at my regular job at overtime to come do this for nothing. And unfortunately, that's the hard reality of it nowadays. The people are still really good about it, but it gets harder and harder every year. The other expense line items, EMS supplies. Again, I brought this up several years in a row. With inflation, cost of all the materials goes up. Some of the medical supplies, again, we're buying, we have to stock Narcan now. We have to stock a couple other things. The expenses go up. and that our supply line has stayed pretty much stagnant in that line item. And that we did increase the ambulance fees last year somewhat. I would hope some of that could offset it. What ends up happening is we end up moving money out of firefighting equipment to cover some of the EMS costs. That's pretty much a consistent thing every year. We end up moving at least a few $1,000s over, which just means it gets that much harder to replace some of the firefighting equipment, which we still need. We've been fortunate that we've been able to, as when we replaced the new engine, part of replacing that truck was replacing a lot of the equipment that went with it. So that offsets some of that challenge, but it still, eventually it catches up with us. The last item that I had on there too was the dues and membership. And that's just an anticipation that our dues to the Mutual Aid Association that we belong to for District 8, which is North Worcester County, hasn't changed in many, many years. They're in the process of hiring basically a full-time grant writer to chase grants on a regional basis for the fire service in the area. And they also support some regional initiatives. They're currently going after grant money to build a regional, what they call a burn building, a training facility that we can actually do live fire in up in Gardner. Right now, the only facilities that we can do that in the area are Auburn, Stowe, or Springfield that have similar type facilities. The NFPA standards say technically all of our people should train under live fire conditions twice a year. That's really tough for us to do. Having a training facility in the area would make that a possibility. But again, there's also, if they get that, they're going to have to increase dues to help support that. They also have some other initiatives like specialized foam equipment that's available through the region, and they're looking to support that. And one of the things they've just looked at is building that up for the dues from each community. And the request to do that, and the number is not an additional $3,000. It's actually increasing the line item to $3,000, so it's a $1,000 request on that, which would actually cover the expense through FY 2020, is what they're forecasting out right now. Vehicle maintenance, I haven't asked for any additional money in the above target this year. The increase that I received last year has seemed to offset the challenges that we have every year, or maybe I've just been lucky and nothing big is broken this year. Again, we're doing some work with the DPW. They're doing some of the maintenance on our equipment. That's been working out very well. Other than the challenge of the mechanic is one person. So now, not only is he doing DPW, police, fire fleet, he's doing what they used to do with 2 people, and now they're doing it with 1. So we still end up farming some stuff out, either due to complexity or to time issues and that, but we have been able to save a little bit of money doing that work in-house through DPW. Again, apparatus we've talked about. I mentioned what the vehicles were. We replaced 1 pumper last year, put that in service in July. That's working out really well. Engine 4, the next due truck, was on the plan this year. As of this point, it's left off. I understand why. I understand the concept of wanting to pay off the first one before we go into the next one. I fully get that. Unfortunately, it doesn't make the problem of the fact that it's a 20-something-year-old truck and it's showing its wear and tear go away. And we've changed our running procedures, so the new truck is taking on a lot more of the work. Engine 4 isn't going out the door quite as much as it used to, and that with the idea of trying to extend that a little bit. That's the apparatus replacement cycle. That's a cycle that I had in there. I believe all of you have had that at some point with the 10 or 15-year plan for the capital plan. My concern again is also in putting off engine 4 for a few years, then replacing that, but then following the same logic of waiting until that truck is paid off before we replace the ladder, makes the ladder truck 40 years old at its replacement. When we purchased the ladder in '05 as a rebuild, the estimate at that point was to get 10 years out of it. Right now, even on my plan, it will get 15 and that. But I think one suggestion, I've made the same suggestion to capital planning, and again, I'm not the finance person, but one thought may be to replace both those vehicles in the same year and finance them over a longer period of time. Because the engine has a lifespan of at least 20 years, the ladder's at least 25. So they are capital items, but they have a long life expectancy on them too. So it may be something, because my concern is going to be especially with the ladder, getting out too far, that we're gonna run into some sort of catastrophic repairs that are gonna be required on that truck, or it's gonna fail at a point when it's in the middle of an operation or when we really need it for something. Letting it go that long is really starting to ask for trouble. So I put that idea out, just that may be something to think about going forward. I know capital planning's been looking at a lot of our long-term issues, and I would hope that would be something they think about. Again, like I said, this is the planned life cycles on the apparatus. I've talked about this with the capital planning. And again, most of the larger trucks are 20 to 25 years. The forestries are on about a 30-year cycle, only because they don't see as much everyday road wear and tear as the big trucks do. The ambulances and the support vehicles are about a 10 to 12-year cycle. They're on commercial chassis. They wear out a little bit faster. Hopefully the plan with the next ambulance that's coming up in a few years will be replace it with a heavier chassis unit like the similar truck we bought a couple of years ago, get a little bit more longer lifespan out of it. The new one's working out very well so far, and I'm hoping that's going to continue on. Impacts of the budget as recommended, status quo. The world's not going to come to an end. We're still going to operate just the same way we do, but we're still seeing the extended response times from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. when we're not staffed. We may be really quick, or it could be 8 to 10 minutes, depending on who's on call, where they live in town, whether they're staying at the station, whether there happens to be anybody there. Again, still a crapshoot. Continued challenge of recruitment and retention of our EMTs. Again, being able to try to fund some of the training that they're really expected to do, offset some of their expenses and their challenges. Hopefully, regardless of whatever we do with staffing the station, we're going to need our call people for way long after I'm gone. And we need to think about things to recruit and retain them. As an example, right now I'm down about 6 people, and I have 2 applications sitting on my desk. We just don't see the influx of people that are looking to be called firefighters like we used to anymore. In fact, more and more we're seeing we have ones that live out of town. Two of the 3 college students that we had both live beyond a range that we normally would have considered them, and that for being on the department otherwise. Again, the ambulance reserves, again, we keep having to dig into other parts of the budget to fund our ambulance supplies, and that I'll probably be looking at bringing forward another small increase on the ambulance fees, trying to bring that, and rather than what we went through last time with almost 10 years before we increased them, trying to stay on a more small but regularly scheduled increase. The impact, if we were given the above target funding, the 24/7 coverage would give us a faster and more consistent initial response. And again, 2 people, it just gets the ambulance on the road or the first fire engine. That's it. Beyond that, the call people are coming in. I've asked for the per diem staffing because I think that's more achievable right now. Ultimately, I know the town doesn't really want to look at career staff, but ultimately that's what we need to get for that. However we do that, the per diem is great. It's working out really well right now because I've got a lot of young, eager people that want to work, but that ebbs and flows. 4 years ago, we didn't have that, and that can come and go. And unfortunately, what I see is I get these young people, they get trained up, they're very gung-ho, and then I lose them to another fire department. They go somewhere else. A lot of them would love to stay here, but ultimately, there's no opportunities for them. And again, the increase in training funding would improve retention of our on-call staff and provide more training opportunities for personnel. They wouldn't have to go all over the place trying to find classes. We could do a lot more of it here and again, give them one more reason to stick around with us. I think I hammered through that one fairly quickly, but a lot of it, unfortunately, is the same from last year. Any questions?
It's certainly all very clear. You do a nice job of explaining all the line items and paying particular attention to the service level, right? The response time. And I do have a question about the response time. When you talked about the standard for turnout time,
Yep.
it's 1 minute.
1 minute. That's based on a career fire department that guys are in the station. And actually, that standard hasn't changed in many, many years. I want to say that standard actually goes back to the days when you wore the long boots
Right.
and the old coats, not the modern bunker gear that we have.
So you said that when the station is staffed, we're at a minute 59. You said that might be overstated a little
I
bit.
think that number's actually high. I think we're down closer to a minute and a half going out. Because a lot of it is a function of, depending on when the guy signs on the radio, going out the station. The old days, the dispatcher could look out and they'd see the truck drive out in the camera. Now, they don't have that anymore. So a lot of times, they may go to sign on, dispatch talks over them, so they miss it, or something's going on, they're confirming where they're going, and they finally sign on, they're already down past the funeral home. So, and some of that could be just when the dispatcher enters the time,
Right.
too. So, a couple of the oddball response times that were the outliers on that, I know at least one of them that was a response when the station was staffed. Some of the oddball ones are because the duty crew was already on the road, and it was a second call. So now you had your call people coming in. One of them was a mutual aid call for a fire that they had to wait until they got a few more guys. Because we don't go out of town with, any less than 3 if we have to go. In town with 2 guys on an engine is enough to get the truck there and hope a couple of the call guys are meeting them on the scene to work, because you really need a lot more than 2.
Other questions? John?
I do have a couple. The engine for repairs. It's part of the capital planning committee. I'm, of course, guilty as charged. We can't respond to a lot of this stuff as quickly as we would even like. During your presentation there, you mentioned that the engine 4 had received a provisional, had passed inspection provisionally,
Yep.
but that you had some problems with the pump through rate, that it would cost $5,000 to $6,000 to repair it. Now, it's going out fewer times.
Correct.
You also said, I thought that it had consumed several $1,000s worth of repairs over the last 3 years. So my question is, when we go through all the claims on your, against your budget, do you have enough money to cover these prospective repairs if they happen, or will that affect your EMS supplies?
The repairs to the vehicle would come out of vehicle maintenance.
Okay.
So it's, generally, we don't cross supplies out of that. That would come out of the, out of vehicle maintenance, which, as you know, we've traditionally had a challenge there. Just to go back, the history on, when I mentioned it, we have put $50,000 in 3 years into that truck. That included a capital appropriation in, I believe, FY 2012. That was a quick overhaul of the truck. It did a bunch of work to the pump.
Yep.
Repaired some corrosion issues, upgraded some of the warning lights to bring them up to more of a modern standard, added some of the reflective chevrons so people don't rear end us. But each year, since then, we've added on money. We've had to have the transmission repaired, the radiator has failed. The passing of the pump provisionally, we got around by increasing the size of the intake hose, that when you see the truck when it drafts out of a pond. It was sort of a poor man's fix. But ultimately, you could see we could end up putting $5,000 or $6,000 into the pump. The pumps, as they get older, they wear.
Yep.
The wear rings go, some of the internal components go. Right now, with the repair, well, what we've done, it's okay right now. And that part of the process was, that truck was our first line truck since 1994 when we got it. And it saw a lot of use. Now it's been put back as it's the second out truck.
Yep.
So the newer engine's going, and also the newer truck is doing all of what that one did, plus it's responding on the mutual aid calls. And that, because the mutual aid calls, sometimes you can be pumping for hours at a big fire in Fitchburg or Leominster or somewhere else. So we're trying to cut down on the wear and tear, hopefully that we won't have to spend that money on the pump. But that would come out of vehicle maintenance. This year, if it happened, I probably couldn't do it. Next year, if I don't have anything else break, I might be able to do it.
Okay.
But crossing my fingers that I won't have to do it.
Mildly surprised about the, about the fact that a lot of the increase in EMS responses are driven by the drug situation. I assumed they were driven more by the increased elderly population in town. Now, that may be just a projection.
I don't have the numbers split. Like I said, some of it is definitely, the increase in the police activity brings up somewhat of an increase with us. Some of I don't know if so much of it is an increase in the elderly population in town is that you have a lot more sick people at home. Anybody that's had any experience with hospitals, they don't keep you in the hospital any longer than you absolutely have to. They get you out, get you home. And unfortunately, you find sometimes these people are coming home with much more complex medical issues. People that 30 years ago never survived to come home. Now they're home, but they need more care. And you can get into, I think there's a lot more socioeconomic type things that you don't see. You don't have the huge nuclear families with lots of extra family around to help, that a lot of times we're the help for these people. If they fall, there's no one else to call. They call us. So that could be, some of it too is the increase. But I think it's what you're seeing right across. I know Fitchburg's a bad comparison, but Fitchburg had a record number of calls this year too. I think everybody on the EMS side is seeing more and more activity.
And I can conclude that the factors that drive this are not likely to abate, that this trend
Correct.
will likely continue to increase.
Correct. I think, like I said, looking back at the 10, and I don't have it in here, but I have a chart going back as far back as I could dig into the late 90s, that the fire inspections, all the other calls, they go up a little bit, but it's very much small. The EMS calls still continue to go up every year. And I thought, my estimate was we were going to break 1,000 calls this year. We were a little under that, but next year.
And one more question, if I may?
Please.
That is regarding the EMS supplies, the cost of the EMS supplies. Is there any possibility of getting reimbursed for that, either by insurance, the insurance of the recipient, or from direct payment from the recipient?
The concept is, that's part of the ambulance fee.
Yeah.
At once upon a time, we could itemize certain items. We still can to an extent, but a lot of the disposables, it's just considered part of the cost of what we bill. We can't bill out individual stuff like that. And what we actually used to see years ago was things like collars, oxygen masks. We'd get them from the hospital. Well, now the hospitals, things are tight for them too. They don't give them out anymore. They guard them.
I'll tell you, Chief, if I cut myself with a chainsaw, you have a lot of leverage over me when you're talking about the clutter factor.
Yep.
Just think about it.
You're not on blood thinners, are you?
Other questions?
I had a question about the EMS supplies as well. So you're saying that you charge a flat fee for the ambulance service?
Correct. There's different levels, whether it's just a basic life support transport or an advanced life support transport, what we charge. And that I could go into a dissertation for that for quite a while, but the fee can vary slightly, and then we can charge for mileage on that. But it's basically a set fee within a range.
Okay. And are you billing the insurance?
Yes, we have a billing company that chases that down.
Yeah.
We bill the insurance companies, depending if certain, like Medicare, Medicaid,
Yeah.
we have to accept what
They give
we
you.
get from them. We can't chase the person for the extra,
Yeah.
the balance. Regular insurance, oftentimes we can. We do that. Some of it you get back, some of it periodically you hear. We come up with the adjustment because it's uncollectibles that have been sitting there for a long time. They can send it to a collection agency, but even they can only get so much.
So how much of this is, does the insurance cover in your budget figure? You're asking for 11,000?
Well, it would be a
What
function of,
percentage?
I don't have the numbers right in front of me, we pull in $300,000-400,000 a year off the ambulance. In
How much?
raw, $300,000 to $400,000 in ambulance receipts. Now, that's not all, some of that goes back out, we have to reimburse the ALS services if we use those. There's obviously the expenses for the vehicles, fuel, personnel, all of that stuff. But we do bring in a fair amount of money.
So the 6,000 that you had budgeted for EMS supplies, that's coming, that none of that is from the insurance reimbursement? That's all?
But
is out of
it
budget?
comes, all the insurance reimbursements goes back into the general fund.
It's going back. into
You want to give me a revolving fund? I'd love to have it. We do have a revolving fund that covers the ALS services, the reimbursement to those, but that's, otherwise it goes back to the town as part of the general revenues for the community.
Okay.
$282,000 is the budget for this year, for the revenue from the ambulance fees.
That's the revenue from the ambulance fees?
Yeah.
And that all goes back into the general fund?
Right.
So none of that is going back to the operation of the ambulance?
Not directly, indirectly.
Well, yeah,
Supports
you
the
know,
budget,
fuel and
supports
maintenance.
us.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
Other questions? Questions from the public? Chief Sullivan, thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Appreciate your time.
And actually, they did say that they've probably got it fixed so you could show the video.
They could do what?
Show the video.
Oh, fine, yeah, I think.
He's not sure. He'd have to
wasn't-
test it
I don't think
out.
it was his problem. It was something
Yep.
that's in PowerPoint that's beyond my ability to figure out.
Thank you. Next item, town manager reports. Carrie couldn't be with us this evening. The only report I have, she sent out a note asking for input on the support for state aid, local aid funding. This came from Representative Benson's office, commenting on Governor Baker's budget. The governor's budget would increase Chapter 70 funding by 1.6% and increase unrestricted general government local aid by 4.3%. And as the legislature begins examining the governor's budget and forming their own, I would encourage you to contact me with any comments or concerns you have within the next few weeks so that Representative Benson has time to consider them. So if anyone has input, they should send it to Sean Rourke, who's the district director in Representative Benson's office. Okay. John, do we have minutes?
We do. The minutes from last week. I
From-
had circulated them around,
February 11.
February 11th.
All right.
So, here's a hard copy. If,
Did everyone have a chance to review them?
Yes. I did.
Can I have a motion to approve the minutes from February 11?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of February 11th.
And
Second.
thank you. Any further discussion? Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? None. Any department or committee reports?
I have one on the school front.
Okay.
School committee met last night. They had put out requests for pricing for busing. Surprisingly, they only had one interested party, which is the current D-bus service that we have now. And the price increase is approximately $40,000. So right now, the superintendent will try to figure out how she is going to absorb that. Busing is not an option. You know, we are required by law to provide busing up to a certain grade. After that, currently we're paying. They charge per student. So she's got to work through the details on that. The special ed busing, it was a very tiny increase, nothing of any significance. It was the mainstream yellow school bus busing that took the big jump. So
So $42,000?
$40,000.
$40,000.
Yeah.
Did you say what the jump was? Why there was a jump?
No, I didn't. I don't know what the jump is. I do know that there's some logistics that need to be figured out now too, because we're, the number of bus runs, the number of buses needed and stuff like that. So I am not 100% sure what went into the reasoning for the price increase, or, their bid on that contract.
And it was the only bid.
It was the only one. It was the only one. So, and this is the first year, I believe this is the first year in a while that they've only had one. They've usually had a couple, so, yeah, different times, I guess.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
Anyone else have a committee or department report?
No.
Oh, I can only say that the Library Board of Trustees is meeting with Carrie tonight to go over their budget. And I don't think that there's too many changes in the wind. I know that there was some concern because the Mars, whatever the program was that they have to
CW
pay
Mars.
into. CW Mars, yeah. The state is not funding to the level that they had. And so there was going to be an increase in that line that was unanticipated. And the
Okay.
police and fire, I think you're up to date, so.
Right. Okay. We will meet again next week, which is our regularly scheduled meeting, 7 o'clock here at Town Hall. We'll hear from DPW and Land Use, and we'll also have a special meeting on March 3rd, where we'll hear from the library and Lunenburg Public Schools.
Okay.
And that's all I have for this evening.
We're meeting March 3rd.
Yes. So our regular meeting next week, February 25th, and then a special meeting on March 3rd. We'll also be having our regular meeting on March 10th. Another special meeting on March 17th, and our regular meeting on March 24th. And I think we take our, we have our official budget hearing on the 24th, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. And then we take our votes on the 31st. Yet another special meeting. We meet every week between now and the end of March, basically.
Yeah. Okay. And we still have 2 vacancies.
Yes, we still have 2 vacancies, although we did get
Throw that out
a lead on one possible candidate this evening.
That's
so
right.
That would be great. But anyone interested in helping out with the Finance Committee, we are authorized as a committee of 7. A quorum is 4. We barely make a quorum with 5. We could use 2 more. With that, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Those in favor?